Hello everyone and welcome to round 3 of our August 2v2 tournament. This time we've got Dubin and Steph up against Polished Noxie and Polina. Dubin and Steph still looking to put one on the board, whereas Polished Noxie and Polina, they've got their one from round 1, but unfortunately couldn't pull it through in round 2. Eventually, I do imagine we will be seeing Death Tacticus and Blues. Have to see where they're standing after this round. See if they manage to go for that 3-0 before we get to see them, or if Gameslayer and PB are going to manage to put something together and take them down in round number 3. Of course, we do have a 6-round tournament here, despite having the 4 teams. Just want to make sure we've clarified that. The double round robin. So we will still be seeing some Death Tacticus / Blues games coming up in some later rounds. Alright, all of our players are on the board at this point. We've got 2 scientifics this time out of Noxie and Polina, whereas Steph and Dubin have once again elected to go for the double expansive. Looks like they really want that large number of claims and those cheaper steel prices for their buildings. One interesting thing, by the way, that I haven't really touched on for why I don't really like expansive as much in 2v2 is most of the time in 2v2, you aren't shipping over vast distances for your resources, and that's one of those minor expansive advantages that can really surprise you a bit, is just how much cheaper their fuel costs are because their ships travel so much faster, and that has a lot less relevance, I think, in 2v2 because players are able to found very, very far away from most resources. You can see here that for Steph and Dubin, as an example, you've got a lot of iron next to Steph and some carbon next to him. And then these geotherms not too far away. Obviously that doesn't really have a whole lot of relevance for the fuel prices, but still, he's got those 3 sources, maybe of resources very close, whereas Dubin has the other 3. He's got water and silicon and aluminum all very close, so nobody's going to be shipping a long way. And so it really does feel like, as expansive, the primary thing you're relying on is the number of extra claims that you will eventually have. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the double expansive continues to play out through this tournament overall. Regardless, Noxie, Polina, Steph, and Dubin are all at HQ2 now. Pretty expected spread of things for the most part. It is a little odd, though, for Polina and Noxie to both have steel production down. That's different from what we often see in 2v2. Maybe okay this game, because you can see that neither of them has a particularly large patch of steel, but they do have an awful lot of steel production going on over on that side of the map. And it's also a bit odd because typically what you see is one player will produce steel, and that's kind of what we see up here with Steph and Dubin. Is Steph is our steel producer. That's what he's doing, right? He is making steel, and he in fact has his steel split up right now to avoid being hit too hard by something like a power surge, which should be a tool that Noxie and Polina are looking to abuse this game if they have the opportunity. But Steph completely focused on steel. That's really all he's doing right now. And then Dubin is left to actually make money in other areas with this glass production, with food, and also with water easily available not too far away. High water auction, kind of in the middle of everything. This doesn't look like a particularly attractive tile for the most part, although I can see Polina or Polished Noxie going after it because it is nice to have access to high water even as a scientist. Just make sure you can benefit from it. So Noxie is going to be the one to take that. Steph and Dubin maybe just a bit dubious about how far away that water is. You can see it's a very long distance away from either of their HQs, so probably just not wanting to pay those fuel prices to ship the water that far. Definitely an understandable decision to let that go for 14,000. Well, Noxie's fuel getting power surge, no big surprise there. You can see that's a lot of cash per second taken away from Noxie. Whereas Polina doesn't really seem to have any particularly valuable resource production set up for the time being. It's really just that steel coming in for Polina. Polina is focused significantly more heavily on steel than Noxie is, so it's kind of nice to see at least some focus in that direction from one of the two members of that team. And then Polina also just making sure to pull in the aluminum and has a little access to carbon for long term. Don't know if that's really the right decision. Might have been good to see a little more power production out of these players, but they're doing okay on debt for the moment, so we'll just have to see how things go moving forward. Both teams getting a player to HQ4 at about the same time. Both Dubin and Polina going to be our first to move there. Also worth paying attention to, by the way, that Dubin got his water pumps frozen, and so that's been very, very painful. You can see this food not really able to do a great job of making money. It's still barely holding on with all these adjacency bonuses despite this water price, but you can see water's price has gotten very, very high, and this will let Noxie continue to make money easily from oxygen and from food, whereas our double expansive team is going to be struggling with that just because they have to actually pay that water price. Once again, I'm a bit worried about our power situation in this game. You can see that Steph, he has moved into a couple of geotherms, probably going to want another 1 or 2 on top of that. Not enough yet to pay the team's power costs completely. And that is definitely going to be a concern. It is worth noting that if you're going to go into geothermal power in particular, it's far more acceptable for both players to contribute to that these days, as the only downside would be if there was a potential superconductor power source, powered for geothermal in particular, or an optimization center came out to upgrade some power. That is the situation. If you are considering doing that, then you really don't want to split up that geothermal power production even. You can see here that Polina and Noxie are just kind of using what claims they can as they can. There hasn't been a specific focus into power by Noxie as we might have liked to see. Only the double solar panel, and so Polina has also taken some geothermal power. Adrenaline Boost did land on that, so they should be actually pulling in some cash from it for the time being. Just a nice little Adrenaline Boost there. These teams really being a bit indecisive on how high they want to push this Optimization Center. Optimization Center, one of the less used items in 2v2, because of course, tools like the Optimization Center and the Patent Lab, they only benefit one player on your team. So it doesn't feel quite as helpful as maybe something like a Hacker Array, a Pleasure Dome, or an Offworld Market. So you just don't see them quite as often, but of course an auctioned off Optimization Center is a hard thing to pass up, especially with chems at such a low price of $60. I really would like to see Dubin start using that as quickly as he can. Maybe on water, maybe on food. As an example, water, of course, he's starting to flood very effectively, but he'll be transitioning out of a large amount of it soon. And having a good stockpile built up might not hurt, because it would let him let that water price get high, perhaps. Maybe encourage some power surges against the water source again, as it all looks very tempting to power surge, doesn't it? So you just let a stockpile build up, don't sell any of it, consume as much water as you can in your buildings, maybe try and drive that price up a little bit, possibly even buy it up a little bit, and encourage the power surge on the water just to start wasting some opponents' black market effects. But Dubin and Steph, they've got to be concerned about a lot more for the moment. As we discussed earlier, these reactors and farms out of Noxie continue to make plenty of money, and that power, well, it hasn't made any money just yet, but it has created a huge amount of debt for Dubin, and so suddenly this majority buyout on the way looks like it is going to happen just now, and Dubin not able to defend himself. The buyout does come through from Noxie and Polina, just not enough cash over on the Dubin-Steph side of things. It feels like that water shortage, that power surge, really did a number on that pair. They really weren't pulling in any cash for a very long period of time. Got a little bit once they got all this additional water online, but too little, too late compared to that consistent scientific production that we were seeing out of Polina and Noxie, especially just this clump of reactors and farms. From here, I don't see a whole lot that Steph can do. Of course, these players will need to try and finish the game out. Steph is encouraged to defend himself. The reason that we haven't been seeing a concession out of one player after his teammate gets eliminated and things are looking so grim is that the time that is required does factor into tie breaks, of course. And so even if you're losing, if you can make the victory take more time, then you've put yourself in a better spot to maybe come back into things later in the tournament. The speed of the win definitely matters from here. Everyone does need to black market everyone more in order to reference what Drop Tables mentioned perhaps a few minutes ago, is no players use the black market enough. Basically, whenever you see this cooldown ticking, that means the player has used black market correctly. And whenever the cooldown is not ticking, it's quite likely that black market has been used incorrectly. It's typically my theory on how things go, especially once you've moved into the middle stages of the game. Obviously, early on, this is significantly less true. Now, Polina and Noxy should be set up to finish this pretty quickly from here. Noxy sitting on enough. We could start to see the buy into things fairly quickly. Staff, it does not look like, is making enough money to really pull through this game. You can see that this is why things get so difficult when the 2v2 buyout occurs, even on just one person, is suddenly Steph is forced to take water very far away from his base in order to have any coming in. He needs to guarantee that he has that coming in so that Noxy and Polina can't simply spike the price as we saw them do a minute ago and keep him from making money. So he has to get access to that water. He has to take bad water because he didn't position initially for that. And then, of course, you're up against the double black market usage from your opponent. You can see that both his electrolysis and his forms were frozen, and so he's just stuck making effectively no money. He has managed to secure one of his own stock, but that's the best he can do, and the buy is now coming from Noxy and Polina. Already secured 4, so both teams need to secure 2 stock. Now, Polina and Noxy, they only need the 1. This game should be over in just a mere moment. There we go. Noxy finally noticed, oh yes, I should finish by pressing that red button. And we do have round number 3. Once again, going to be going to Noxy and Polina. So we're starting to see our bracket really get a bit more secure here, it looks like. We did have a result from the other side of things already. I'm going to go ahead and get our time recorded. Very similar length to both games this time. I believe it was 7:10 for our time, yes? Yes, 7:10 for our time. So, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I've got everything recorded correctly here. There we go. Alright, so our bracket is starting to show itself a bit here. We've got all 6 of our points awarded from our first 6 games. And where things stand at our halfway point is Blues DT are up in the lead with 3 points. Polina and Noxy solidly in second with 2. Gameslayer and PB sitting on 1. And Dubin and Steph still have not yet managed to put a point on the board. So that's where things sit at our halfway marker as we move into round number 4.